Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of Shakin Hands. I'm your host, Jack Moran. You can find me on Instagram at Blue Collar Kid. That is Blue Collar KEHD. Today on the podcast, we have George Heisel, the owner of ExpoCredit. How we doing today, George?
We're doing great, Jack. Thanks for having me today.
So we talked a little bit before this. This is just a podcast to hopefully inspire people who are looking to make the switch into entrepreneurship to do so by hearing the experiences of successful entrepreneurs like yourself. So I figured we'd just start out with where are you kind of at right now, as an entrepreneur? What's your current situation? What ventures are you working on?
I have 2 ventures I'm working on today. One is called ExpoCredit. We buy receivables. So smaller companies that are selling to bigger companies don't want to wait 60 days to get paid. We'll buy it on that same day that it's issued, and we'll collect it in 60 days, and we take a small fee of 1.5%, anywhere from 1 to 1.5% each month. So typically we advance 80%. They get 80% up front. We collect it. We take our fee out, and we give the rest back to them. And it's a cycle that allows them to grow their business.
And that's your core business?
Yes, sir.
And what kind of companies are you doing that for?
Mostly it's international. So we're doing a lot in Mexico. Mexico's growing a lot. It's funny for being an upstate blue collar kid. We went a long way from there. But I think that one of the things that I think would be interesting for your audience is the fact that you follow your passions. So I had an obsession with South America when I was young. And so when you have that kind of dream and goals, you just get attracted to it. And there's no better city in America connected to South America than Miami. So I was just an investor after selling my first company, and I was lending money to ExpoCredit. They would put it out. I was lending at 12%. They would put it out at 18%, and they would keep the 6% difference. And it was, unfortunately, I was the world's worst investor after selling my company. So I think as the mindset of an entrepreneur, you're not set up to be a great investor, and you need mentors and you need people that can help you through that, because generally to be an entrepreneur, you have to be super optimistic. So when you look at an investment, you should not be optimistic. You should be super pessimistic and make sure that you're able to get your investment back. So ExpoCredit took too much risk, and so each time that they had problems, I had to put more money in, and eventually me and another close friend of mine ended up buying out the last partner. And so this guy from upstate New York, bit of redneck, ended up with this international factoring business. And we do, not only do we do Mexico, but we're also in Colombia, Ecuador. We've done stuff in Brazil. We're looking at Guyana in the future. So that's my major time investment. And then I have a second company called Bill Shark that I am a co-founder, first investor. And they do back office technology for banks and large companies like Intuit and Albert. And our big client now is JP Morgan, which is rolling out as we speak. So it's a very exciting time for this company. But I think that if I was going to talk to your audience again about that is staying power. It took 8 years to get a large bank contract implemented. 8 years, but we still had to pay salaries. We still had to keep the lights on. And so there was a lot of grit to that. Once again, when people start businesses and they hear about these overnight successes, I would say an overnight success starts in 10 years and probably ends in 20 years. And it takes a lot of grit and a lot of focus. I have a very close friend, Bobby Castro, who took $1,500 and turned it into a $700 million empire. And the 2 things that he would tell your audience would be humble and be focused. And so every day when I wake up, I think about Bobby and I say, how can I be more focused? And so at ExpoCredit, we really focus on blue chip paper. So before we'd wait for the phone to ring, today we generate calls and focus on the best paper. So, we're focusing on Walmart, Schlumberger, Halliburton, AbBev, the Budweiser holding company, companies like that. So the quality of the paper that you purchase just makes the whole thing less risky. Because as entrepreneurs wake up in the morning, they have to think about risk every day, and they have to have a backup plan on every single thing that they do. And it's an obsession, and you have to be super focused.
So how do you stay optimistic through an adversity? Like when it seems like everything's caving in on you, like how do you keep you keep that staying power, as you say?
Well, I've had some recent challenges. In 2022, we were defrauded for a large sum of money. But the fact that the company was so resilient and was still making a profit and was still generating cash flow, we were able to push through that. It was depressing. I had employees crying that this happened. And you just know that you're going to get through it. And, I'm a lot older than you, so I've been through it many times where you think you're not going to make it. In my first company at Doctor Diabetic, there was many days when I was like, am I going to make it? And you have to look at your bank account. You got to see how much cash you have in the bank and then figure out, am I going to get through the day? And if you have that, it's a good day, and I think that people need to look at that. But I've always had a backup plan. Like I always had a little bit of savings behind me in case I had to reach into it to help, cover payroll or buy the next piece of advertisement. I think that it's a great day if you can get out of bed, right? And you have to understand your business. And if you understand your business, you have to see what's going well and you have to lean into it. You can't, as they say, you can't cry over spilled milk.
Yeah, you said before, like, how one of the main two focuses is being humble. Like, why is that so important? I know that's something that I've had to really focus on because as an entrepreneur, like, you kind of do have to have an ego, but also you have to really suppress it. And I think, like, early in your career, you're trying to, like, carve your, place out in this world. So you're trying to get that affirmation. So you're pretending to be a hot shit when you're really not, but that can kind of work against you. Like, why do you think being humble is so important? And how do you be humble?
Well, I have a theory that there's a 2x4 right around the corner about to hit you in the face. And as you look at your business, the environmental challenges that are going on, you don't know what's next. You don't know what next regulation is going to come up. So you have to look at each day like, hey, I'm going to treat everyone with respect because I might have to go back to that person at some point and ask a favor. But I think that you have to be a giver. I think you have to give to your employees every day. I think and positive energy. If you're not positive, then, how can you expect your employees to be positive? Because there is a 2x4 around the corner. If it's a government agency that shows up at your door, if it's a bank line that all of a sudden, for one reason or another, they don't want to do business with you anymore. And then what do? What is your backup plan? Maybe you told off a banker because his rates were too high and he was arrogant and you told him off. And the following week, you got to go back to that guy and say, hey, listen, I'm no longer with Bank United. I want to go to Wood Forest, for example, but when I was talking to 10 banks, I treated every single one of them with respect because you don't know when you're going to go back, or maybe you're growing a lot and they need a participant. And if you treat everyone with respect, they want to do business with you. People want to do business with people that respect them. And there's nothing worse than being the smartest person in the room. Because if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. And I'm not the original quoter of that, but I really believe in that. You want to surround yourself with talented people. But talent comes in so many different fashions. One guy is really good with people. Another one's really good with numbers. And you need all those people. My current company is run by women. I have a president that's a woman. She is phenomenal. I would match her up to anyone. And then the COO is also a woman who has unbelievable people skills. She can get the employees to go in any direction, and they do it with a smile on their face, and that's a talent.
What's your skill set, do you think? Like, what is your value add to a company? Like, what is the thing that you focus on most when you're contributing to your own company?
I think that I didn't ever feel really talented, so I went into every conversation with humility, because I always assumed the person in the room smarter than me. I had my academic challenges. I did graduate, but, I like to brag that I graduated sixth in my class at Babson College, and that was sixth from the bottom. So I just got I barely got through. There were other issues there. I partied too much, and I had a lot of fun. I stopped buying books junior year, and stuff like that was probably not helping my grades. But I did pick out the two smartest kids in the school, Dave Wallace and Mark Cabrera, and stayed in touch with them because I knew that they were going places, and I knew that if I ever needed help, I could go to them. And then coincidentally, Dave Wallace went into the diabetic testing supply business before I did and built 3 phenomenal companies. And I was very fortunate that I kept that relationship, because we were peers. You might not say we were mentors, but we encouraged each other. We talked a lot. Those were fast growing businesses where you're hiring hundreds of employees, and to be able to go and talk to an intelligent, smart person who I've always treated with respect. Same with Mark Cabrera, who's a huge banker for Oppenheimer. Those relationships came back to me. So I think what's really important, Jack, is that you keep in touch with people that you respect.
How do you develop relationships? Like, how do you earn that respect with someone that you may have just met and you're trying to develop a relationship with? What do you think is the foundation of a good relationship?
Oh, I think you asked me what my talent is. I can probably tell you today, though I had the talent the whole time. I'd never really codified it, but building trust with people. And I think that the best way to build trust with people is actually care. I mean, I like people. I can't be around people for 10 hours a day because of the energy that I try to give in the relationship. But 1 or 2 hours in the morning, like this moment with you, Jack, I'm trying to give you my energy. And I think that you'll remember that. I think that you'll remember that, hey, this guy gave me his energy. He gave me something, right? And you take the time to learn about the person. Do they like dogs? Do they like, kids? Do they, what are their big dreams? And then you start talking about whatever their big dreams are. And then you become a good storyteller. And I think people really enjoy storytelling. Again, I didn't know that it has been recently labeled as something, but I was always telling funny stories because I pay attention. I pay attention to the person, so I include them in that story. And people love that. They enjoy it. And so I think that in all relationships, one thing I would also tell entrepreneurs, when you join an organization and you do networking, plan to be there for a year before you actually tell people what you're looking for or how they can help you. Because everyone has like a defense mechanism, and the only way that they're going to let you break that down is over time, and they see that you're not out just for yourself, that you're going to help yourself and you're going to help them, and you're going to work together in an organization, be a volunteer. In YPO, I initially joined it, and it stands for Young Presidents Organization. In the beginning, I didn't even know that there was value. And then one day I got a phone call from them. They gave, and they said, hey, we have this thing called Forum. And it was like a small business group that you could talk about your personal life. You could talk about your business. You could talk about your family. And it really, in some ways, saved my marriage because I was working, 70 hours a week. And I was, having the ups and downs with modes people have in their relationships and things that I didn't think were normal. They said, I told them that, I was struggling with this, and they're like, welcome, because we're all struggling at times. The most important business decision any person ever makes is who they marry. Because you that's the only person that can take 50% of your assets, for one, for men and women, so you need to make sure that you're marrying the person that's going to help you achieve and share your dream, right? Today I have a very good relationship with my wife. When I was first starting out, I don't think she understood what it took to run a business because she came from a different background. But, the one thing she always did was she did trust me. Like, she did trust me when I walked out that door that I would make the right decisions. I would never give up. And today she will say that I'm unbreakable. And we've gone through lots of things. We lost a $45 million line of credit. So what do? You got to go back to your friends that you've had accumulated over many years and say, hey, would you like to help? And I would say 9 out of 10 people that I asked said yes. Now I was older, I was mature. They saw how I could run a business, and they said yes. And I will always remember those people.
And so you talked about before, I think it's an interesting segue about learning or losing 50% of your assets. I think a big risk that, people feel this fear of, like, to say bluntly, getting fucked over when they start a business. How do you protect yourself, like, to prevent that from happening? Or is it inevitable?
Well, you're definitely going to get fucked once or twice if you own your own business. But, are you resilient, and do you have a backup plan? So if you have a backup plan, which typically is source of money, is all businesses run on money, right? So I like to say that there's 4 ways to become rich. The first one is to inherit it, which we're not here on a podcast to talk about. And that wasn't me. That wasn't you. The second one is just to save your money. The richest man in Babylon saved 10% of his income every month, whenever he was paid. I would say you have to probably do 20% of that, but he was accumulating some money. The third way of becoming rich is become a professional doctor, engineer, professor, and, get paid a lot and save a lot, right? And then the fourth one is starting your own business. But all 4 have one thing in common, is you got to go back to the second one, which is you got to save your money. To own your own business, you have to be able to manage money. And, if that's just make sure that you always get 3 vendors when you buy something, and you don't necessarily have to go with the lowest price, but when you get 3 vendors, you're going to find out all the different nuances of making a purchase. If it's furniture or it's, media equipment, you're going to check 3 vendors, you're going to talk to salespeople, and you're going to learn something because you're going to go in with a little curiosity. As an entrepreneur, you have to be curious. If not, you're closing the door to learning things that you're going to need in the future. So to go back to getting fucked, first of all, you can't be a lawyer because that's all they think about is getting fucked, and that's why they're not great entrepreneurs. I'd like to share a legal hack, or at least prepare your audience about lawyers. They are the worst. They are the opposite of you, and they're there to make money. So your first question I would ask all lawyers is, what car do you drive? And if they're driving a fancy car, do not hire them. And you might have to sift through 100 of them, but find out what car they're driving. The second one is we typically take the second referral of a lawyer, and you shouldn't do that. Oh, my friend knows this lawyer, he'll talk to him. And a lot of them have really good personalities. And in the beginning, they're always going to tell you what you want to hear. Oh, you got a good case. Don't worry about this. I'm going to, make it very painless for you. And it starts. And 3 months later, you're in for, depending on what it is. If it's a big business dispute, you're in for $300,000. If it's a dog bite, you're in for $40,000. And you're like, what's going on? And they're like, well, we need to settle, But 3 months ago, you were telling me that, I had a great case. And so the entrepreneur has to prepare himself to manage in a world that's like a parallel universe because they don't follow the same rules. So one thing is you're going to go into battle and you don't even know how good your lawyer is going to be. It's usually in the first battle. And most of you will not have a good lawyer. Second is they're arbitrarily going to tell you a dollar amount. So, I'm going to charge you $400 an hour. In Miami right now, it's probably $800 to $1,000. That doesn't matter as much as how many hours they're going to bill you. So another hack is you want a partner, not an associate. You want a partner, and you want that partner so busy that it takes them about 24 hours to call you back when you call them, okay? Because if they call you right back, then you know that they don't have a lot of hours to bill, and so you're going to get a big bill at the end of the month. Another thing that they do is they let the bills accumulate. So 3 months into it, you get this big $40,000 bill. But if you got the first bill in the first month, then sometimes they will send the first one, but then they'll hold them. You really have to micromanage your lawyer. And another hack with lawyers is don't let them allow anyone else to work on your case. That's where you get the big bills. And, so if you're in a business dispute, all of a sudden an associate is on your case too. And they're always like, well, the associate's half the cost of what I charge. Yeah, but they're going to charge you for 10 hours where a busy partner is going to charge you for an hour.
Right.
So only allow that. The other thing is, which I'm a sinner here, and I'm trying to reform myself, is take the time to read the contract they put in front of you. And one thing, you can write on it. You don't have to accept what they said, the retainer letter, they call it. For example, they shouldn't charge interest. And the other thing is, they're charging you anywhere from $400 to $600 to $1,000, and they're charging you for research? It's ridiculous. Like, absolutely ridiculous. So we could spend a lot of time talking about this. Those are a couple things that each person, when they have to, and very likely if you grow a decent-sized business, at some point you'll need a lawyer. With that said, don't let them jade you. Be that kind of person that likes people, wants to grow your business, wants to get out there and meet people and build unbelievable relationships. The other thing is, there's only two things that you should be doing as an entrepreneur. Love your family, take care of your family, and think and live your business. Okay? No hobbies. I've done multi-million-dollar deals. I've never done it in a golf course. I've never done it in a bar. If you really believe in what you're doing and you want to own your own business, you need to focus on your business and your family. That's it. And put your family first, but then everything else is about the business. All of your friendships should go away, and all your friendship should be inside your business. You should have great relationship with your employees. You should have great relationships with your clients. You should have great relationships with your bankers. And, you can be respectful to your lawyer, too, if you want.
So what is what is one thing that you wish that you had done when you were first starting out in entrepreneurship? If you could restart your business or do it all over again?
Well, I think there's two questions there. One is what I do if I started from scratch today. And then back at Doctor Diabetic, when I sold it, I didn't have a board of advisors, or I didn't have a board of directors. Today at Expo, I have a board of directors. My chairman, who everyone's like, why do you have a chairman? You're the majority shareholder. Why aren't you the chairman? Because he's the best guy to do that job. He sold his company for $500 million. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's brilliant. And I'm very fortunate that he's giving me his time to be my chairman. But back at Doctor Diabetic, I didn't have a board of advisors. I didn't have a board of directors. And that was a big mistake, because I think if I had sold my business with a board, I would have gotten more money. I mean, I did great, but I think I would have done even better with a board. I did have a board of advisors in YPO, but they weren't active in my business, seeing the day-to-day of my business. And it sounds sophisticated, and it wasn't because I was being arrogant, or I don't think at that time. I just was so focused that I was like, oh, if I bring a board in, then I have to spend time with them and get them up to speed, and what do I pay them, and all that kind of stuff. And looking back, it was a mistake not doing that. So once your company is going, you should have mentors that have done this before. You should have people that are better at different areas of your business than you are. Typically, maybe someone that's already sold in that sector. So that was a big mistake looking back.
So obviously one of the biggest pieces, and I think this is something that gets overlooked a lot, is how important sales is within a business. What do you think the key is to driving sales within an organization?
Systems, holding people accountable, leading by example. So Doctor Diabetic, I was the first employee, and you're not allowed to go call Medicare patients. So I would run TV commercials, and then I would get phone calls, and they would call me first. And then because I was only a one-man show, I had caller ID. I was able to see the other calls that come in, even though I was talking to the first one that called. And I would listen to the patient, and I would figure out what clicked, what was important to them. So, for example, if I would say, where are you getting your diabetic testing supplies today? And they would say, I get them at the pharmacy. Boom. That's all I needed to hear. So I wrote it down. So I wrote a sales script. In other experiences, I think it's okay. People sometimes are like, well, I can't really work for someone. I need to run my own business. I worked for other people and I learned about sales scripts. And so I wrote sales scripts, and then we would fine tune them as I hired people, we would fine tune them as we go, and then we would FQA. But as an entrepreneur, you have to stay on top of your salespeople. And it's really important that the message of your product gets out there through the voice of your salesperson. And the only way you're going to do that is having sales scripts. I again, didn't graduate top of my class. But I did naturally have an ability with people. And so fortunately for me, I think sales is the most important thing of a business. And if the CEO or the founder isn't willing to sell, they probably shouldn't be in the business, because there's a lot of really smart people that come with really great products. And those products are, in the dustbin of history because they didn't get out and sell it. Right. I have a very close, very wealthy friend that graduated from Georgia Tech and started a technology company. And if you ask him his story, he will tell you how he would sleep. He would arrive in Orlando. He would sleep in his rental car in the back lot because the timer of the car didn't start until after he drove off the lot. And so he couldn't afford a hotel, and he could barely afford to rent the car from Hertz, I guess, in this example. So he'd sleep in the back for 6 hours, and then he would drive off. And he knew how to get to all the convention centers without paying tolls. That's how little money he had. Wow. And today, he's probably a billionaire, and he is just an amazing human being. And he did it from sheer grit. And and he was his own salesman. So go back to sales. Sales for me is everything. Because all companies need to grow, because you don't know what the competitors are doing. And by growing, that means you're going to increase your resources. I think when you go back to starting your own business, you want to look at a business that has good margins. Now, I didn't know that when I started Doctor Diabetic. It was very anecdotal what I learned. One of my mentors, who knew I wanted to go out on my own, said, hey, I'm renting to this guy that's not working very hard, and he's making a lot of money, and he's selling diabetic testing supplies. And so I said, well, let's go talk to him. And I was very energetic. I would talk to anyone. So I went and I talked to the guy, and he was making a lot of money. This was not 2000. He was making $300,000 a year, and he was working 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, right? Monday through Friday. So I decided, hey, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to work 70 hours a week and not pay myself anything. And I started generating money because it was a good margin business. So that was basically me not knowing that I got into a good margin business. Right. So if the margins are there and you're growing, it gives you resources, to hire more people, to advertise more. And
you can cover your ass with some good margins, right?
Exactly right. My mentor would say, because there was times when I questioned of being in the diabetic testing supply business. I'd look outside and be like, oh, this is terrible. There's so many headaches. There's so many problems. And you say, yeah, you could run a diner too and make, you'll have the same headaches, same hours, and not make any money. So.
Right. Yeah, I always say I'm not smart enough to run a company with low margins.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of errors, a lot of rooms. The other thing is, I would say,
count numbers on my hands.
That's awesome. Is when you I used to say that if you're growing, you can make a lot more mistakes.
Right.
So it's really, really important. And I know a guy that was making a lot of money and he wasn't growing. And me and Dave Wallace blew by him. Maybe he had 4,000 patients. We had 10,000, and he'd been in the business already a decade. Dave had been in the business 3 or 4 years, and I'd been in the business for 2. And we blew by him, and then he woke up, and it was the market changed, man. People are moving fast. People are a little more aggressive in, growing their businesses. And sure enough, he had the resources, so he started growing his company. But he was definitely following us.
So you said before in the beginning, to the answer to the question, to grow sales, you got to have systems and accountability. How do you manage people? That's something that's I've found to be really difficult. Is to influence people and get them to do things that you can see intuitively that are good things for them, but they may not necessarily see it.
Well, I think you already have one gift is you're going to lead by example, right? So I think that that's super important. But then fair, firm, and consistent, and don't make exceptions. Like, people think that I'm tough. Like the people that don't know me think, you terminated that guy, but it's never a surprise. I mean, I remember I once had to terminate someone that was a surprise because the other investors wanted a change of personnel and they were surprised. And, in some ways it really broke my heart because that's not how I roll. So a progressive disciplinary program, like where you set the expectations, doesn't mean that you're heartless. If there was a legitimate reason, you give people warnings. But, it progressively gets more strict. So if someone's, late, they missed a meeting, they get written up and they know that that's not acceptable. Right. But I think that's really important is you don't have favorites. Like, oh, well, this guy pulled down this contract and so he's been late for 6 weeks and it doesn't matter. No, it doesn't matter. And sometimes you have to as your company's growing, sometimes you have to let go of your MVP because their
affects the culture.
It affects the culture. They're not setting the example that you want because you want systems in place. And so it's not robotic, but you limit people's, a lot of people in startups, they get to wear a lot of hats. But as you get bigger, you want people to be more specialized. So it's super important. So to answer your question though, is progressive discipline so that there's no surprises. And it can be 8 mornings or whatever you think is fair, and 2 things happen. One, they decide to change their behavior, or 2, they decide to leave. The best termination is a resignation, always, as long as you're respectful, you don't have to be rude, you don't have to be aggressive. And the other thing is don't procrastinate it. Don't let problems fester.
Yeah.
Always confront whatever the problem is. And, I tell people, I'm not here for the good news. I'm here for the bad news, right? The good news, I don't really care. And if are you an optimist or a pessimist when you look at business? Are you everything is blue sky, or you're more of the agony of defeat type person? I'm definitely an agony of defeat person. Even though I'm optimistic, I have a huge fear of failure, and that's why I cover a lot of bases because I was like, oh, this could go wrong, that could go wrong, And over time, they all went wrong at one point or another. I had huge audits from Medicare, because we got so big, we got on the radar. I had 26 people in the audit program, But if you were not saving your money, keeping your margins together, you wouldn't have able to hire 26 people to, answer every question that Medicare has.
And I want to kind of segue a little bit before we wrap up, into just the personal side of you as an entrepreneur. What are and I think we talked about this last time when we met with Matt. You talked about the main vices for an entrepreneur. What are those main vices that kind of distract you from entrepreneurship?
Well, ego is definitely one of the big ones. You start making a little bit of money and thinking that you're better than you actually are. And then you have the L's, which is leverage. You get too far into debt. Ladies and liquor. Today it's liquor or marijuana or whatever that distraction takes you.
And you don't really drink, right? I think we talked about that.
Yeah, I quit when I was 27. I mean, I'm from upstate New York. I'm Irish. There was a lot of drinking involved in college. And, at one point it was time to grow up. If your dreams are that big, it's not a big sacrifice. If your dreams are that big, a lot of people that get in trouble because they try to maintain a lifestyle that they don't deserve, and that's leverage. I know a lot of people, they'll take their life savings, maybe it's $200,000. They start their own business. They start making little money, and then they go out and buy a Mercedes or a BMW, and they start showing off their success. But then, Medicare made cuts, they lowered the reimbursement. So if you're not prepared for those moments and you have debt, for example, I never had debt on my business. It was only seasonal debt. Today, I don't have debt on my house. Those are the kinds of things that prepare me for those rainy days that come. They do come. I don't care how good you are, they come. And I think sometimes people think, oh, Mark Zuckerberg, for example. he's one in, he's like 3 out of 7 billion people in the world. And I think that there's a lot of just fundamental blocking and tackling for people like us, that have common sense and want to build something and enjoy it. You have to enjoy it too. If you're doing it for the money, it'll never work out, because the first time that you get a roadblock, you want to quit because you're not doing it for the right reasons.
Was quitting drinking like imperative to you? Like, I talk to people about this a lot, and I don't drink, and that was a big step for me to grow my business and get my business started. I wouldn't be where I am today if I had continued partying and doing those things. And for me, it just kind of got mundane. Like, I like the experience and I like the challenge, and it became easy to just get drunk and have fun. Whereas this is a much more gratifying challenge that proceeds on and just keeps on giving. But I talk to a lot of people that intuitively understand that. They feel that they should stop and that it's holding them back. But then there's this kind of cultural pressure to continue doing it. So what would I think it's better coming from you, someone who's had so much success and where you are today and living in a beautiful place like this, to kind of speak to how that held you back and why it was important for you to nix that from your life.
Jack, that you're brave, because most people don't like talking about that because they think that you're judging them or you're not fun or something. I was a lot of fun, and I was 27 years old, and I would go out, and it was cute when you were younger, but if you're an adult and you're planning to run your own business, people want to be able to count on you. So I was working in the ambulance business. It is one of the hardest businesses in the world because it has all the worst things: heavy labor, unions. Not that unions are bad, because I've had good experience with unions. Government agencies, government contracting, insurances, malpractice, all of these things. And you're when people dial 911, you better have an ambulance at their house, and you better, no excuses, right? That's extremely stressful. And I watched people that were in my industry that drank, and the stress got worse. It didn't get better, And so I remember being in San Diego, and I was sitting in a bar restaurant, and I was embarrassed because the mayor's chief of staff was in there, and I was in a bar. Even though I was just eating food, I was just embarrassed because I wanted to set an example that they could count on me, okay? The one reason that people have been willing to give me, right now, $90 million is they trust me. And they might not want to go out drinking with me because I don't drink, right? I might not be fun at night. But when they give me their money, they know their money is with someone that they can count on. That's super important. There's a great YouTube, the Huberman Labs, and he just walks. There's no physical benefit for alcohol. As a matter of fact, when you're not drinking, you produce more of the stress hormone. That's why people become alcoholics, because they start generating more and more of that stress hormone when they're not drinking. So of course, then they go and they drink more, right? If you're 100% focused on your business, you don't have time to be drinking, and there are people that do it. But now that I'm a lot older and watching people that were more talented than me, we're slowly putting a little bit of poison in their system after, say I was 27 for the last 30 years, and they don't have the fire in the belly that I still have. Today I'm doing a podcast with you. How did that happen? Is because I'm open to the world. I'm not hungover. I'm not in a bad mood. The other thing is it makes you moody, Now, I don't lecture anyone. No one, you asked, Jack, and you're brave for asking, because most people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to give it up. And if you'd asked me a day before I was 27, I would think, oh, that's a waste and I can do it without that. And I did have a really strong work ethic. When I was in my teens, I was working.
That's sustainable.
Right. You can get away with a lot when you're younger. You can be hungover at work, whatever. But I was working 2 jobs. And the other thing is, if you don't have a strong work ethic, you can't have your own business. You have to be, you set your own hours when you're in business. That's a joke. You're working all the time, thinking about it all the time. You're laying awake in bed, and you're thinking about it. So I would strongly tell your audience that, that's one sacrifice. Because owning your business, you have to make sacrifices.
Yeah.
Right?
It's I mean, it's so logical, right? But like, why do you think people won't make the switch? Like, if there's and like they say to me that they, I respect that you're doing it. It makes so much sense, but like, why aren't people making that logical switch? Because now looking back, like, makes no sense to me why I even participated in that. It was illogical.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're part of the 1%, right? Anyone that owns their own business is less than 1%, So you make the choice, that sacrifice, so you can be fully focused in your enterprise of whatever that is, because it does take all of you.
And so this is a good question I always like to ask. Like, how do you define success? Like, what is success for you?
Well, the one flying around the internet is your kids want to hang out with you when you're old, right? I think I have that, so I think I'm pretty successful. I think the wealthiest person I know, that I personally know really well, is Mike Pappas. He has 12 grandchildren. That's wealth. I mean, that truly is wealth. Now, I know that people will say, well, you already have some success, and so that's easy for you to say. But as you get older, there's really nothing more important than your relationships. I started a group called TALG, which stands for Tiger Alumni Lunch Group, because I'm not in Tiger anymore, Tiger 21. And it's really just a long-term commitment to friendships, and people that have done well, and that I've met through that group. And we bring in interesting speakers. But like a guy that I'm really close to, Gary Zwellinger, I would see him 2 times a year, but because I started this lunch, I'm going to see him 6 times. Wow. And I've done some political fundraising, and I went back to this group and said, hey, there's no pressure, but if you'd like to come to my house, you're coming to these lunches, if you like to interact with the same people and meet some of the politicians that we know, especially in Florida. I'm a big Florida guy. I think Florida is just an amazing state, amazing leadership. Our governor led us through an absolutely horrific time during COVID when we were lied to by our government, and he led the way. The most probably important election in the last 20 years was in 2018, when Governor Ron DeSantis beat Andrew Gillum. If Andrew Gillum was the governor, I think the country would still be closed down. There are also some other great governors that led the way of opening, but none so great as Ron DeSantis.
How much does politics play a piece in business?
It depends on what industry you're in. I think that if I was going to give someone advice about starting a business today, if I was going to start over, the government is spending $6 trillion a year, $1.6 trillion that they don't even have. They're just printing. So, as they say, why do you rob banks? It's because that's where the money is, for the famous bank robber. The money is in government. So if there's ways to provide a product to the government. So backing up on this, if I was going to start over, I would start a sales company. They used to call them manufacturing reps. And then I would go to a guy like you and say, hey, you have a phenomenal product. You're helping the environment. I'd like to sell for you. And maybe I get a small base, probably not. I get a commission. I do my first sale. I'm not sure what the commission is, but instead of spending it myself, I hire an employee. And now there's 2 of us. Now I have a business, okay? And I picked your product because it's a great product, and it's helping the environment because that's what I'm into at the time. If that's what you're into. I was in healthcare, so helping diabetics was what I was into, right? Find something you're into that you can grow the business, find a product. Everyone needs sales, okay?
That's good advice.
So the government is, you could take your environmental, your technologies and help the government also and do government contracting. They have bodies of water that need fixing. There's public golf courses. So there's those opportunities, and they just have a lot of money. But with all things is you have to have staying power, because the business cycles, the longer they are, the more you have to have staying power, right? So in your business, it's 12 months. I think in my business now at ExpoCredit is probably 18 months, Yeah. But once you get a client, it's really good. Bill Shark, it took a decade. I mean, we did a contract with Goldman Sachs, then we did a contract with Citibank. They fell apart, nothing to do with us. but it allowed us to set us up to work with JP Morgan, and things are going really well. And that staying power is so important. So backing up though, it's always about sales in the end. You have to find a demand for something, right? And once you have it, don't spend the money on yourself. Hire an employee, and then there's two of you, and now you're going to get double the sales, hopefully, by making a sales script, right? Let's go back to that sales script and share what wins and what doesn't, and then collaborate with your employees. Employees love collaboration, and you would be surprised what you can learn from your employees. They're thinking about it too. And I had 500 brains working for Doctor Diabetic, and we engaged them, and we had meetings, and I met with each one of them, and they talked to them. They're like, oh, I see you in the office every day, walking through the call center, and it inspires us because you used to do the same thing we did. And I said, I did. ExpoCredit, the business that we're in is a very, very tough business. And the reason we've been successful and continue to stay in business, I've been there like 11 years. It's going to be a 20-year overnight success, is because it's so hard to get good clients. It's so hard to get that blue chip paper, and you have to be.
Is it because it's competitive or?
Competitive. I think, and there's an education piece to it. Clients. You get a big client, and you don't want to share your information with others. So there's a trust element there. The other thing is when you're running your own business, diversity of client base is so important. One of the things about it, like investing or when you look at businesses, typically, I like to say that it's an 80-20, but the reality is it's probably one, and all the other clients are like, window dressing. So if that business loses that one client, they're out. So a client, they're doing, I don't know, $50 million in sales, but it's all with Walmart. And all of a sudden someone else shows up and Walmart has a better product and you're out, So as soon as you get a really high quality client, you don't celebrate. You go out and get the second one and the third one. You never celebrate that. You worry about failing, in those businesses and those people that are like that. So it's a weird personality. It's not for everyone, but I remember I would say that I was going to be rich and people were like, no, I've seen you in school. No, you're not. You're not. But no one can steal your dreams. I don't care. You can have an abusive parent. You can, be in the worst conditions growing up. But if you have that dream inside you, you can manifest it. You really can. I'm a big believer in manifesting things. So,
what does manifestation look like for you? Is it a practice or is it just like a function? Fugazi?
I think it's basically it's a lifestyle. Like I
agree.
I didn't even remember this. There was that secret that book called The Secret, and it was basically manifesting things. But let's not be, spiritual. Just be a goal setter. If you're a goal setter, things are going to happen for you. You fail, you get up, you set another goal, right? So coincidentally, I have an old friend in Brazil. I was living in Brazil. I had 3,500 pulleys at the time. And I had a picture of a house with a fountain in front of it, the circular driveway, on my laptop. Back then they had like these old heavy laptops, right? And I forgot about it. And I don't know, for years it was on there, right? And then I was talking to my close friend, because I stay in touch with all my friends. Like I try to, it's hard, but sending a birthday card or texting people, I put effort into it. When I'm home and I'm not working, my kids are a lot older now, so they're driving and they're independent, so I have more time. So I send out texts on Father's Day and wish people happy Father's Day, right? Do I need to do that today? Probably not, but I enjoy it because I like people. Anyway, I called him. He's starting his own business, another business in Brazil. And he goes, yeah, and I remember when you had that picture of the laptop of that house with the fountain in the middle, with the circular driveway. You're living in that house. I'm like, you're right, I am actually. And I think it's actually the picture in my Vanguard account. Like you have to have a picture for password protection.
Right.
And I forgot about that too, because I really never go to the Vanguard thing. I was like, oh my God, But
visualization is key, like in the beginning.
When I graduated from Babson, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything, right? I just had this big dream. And I wrote down 3 things: that I wanted to be worth $65 million when I was 40 years old. I wanted I wanted to be in YPO. I wanted to be in YPO, which I didn't really know what it was, but there was two people in my class. The parents were very rich and they were in YPO, so I thought, put that down. And sure enough, I got an offer when I was 40 for $65 million for Doctor Diabetic. The big mistake that I made was, though, I needed to write down liquid. The deal fell apart. It wasn't worth it. I mean, I wanted to sell it, and it did really well. But at the time, I should have wrote down liquid $65 million. So if you guys are writing down your goals, make sure you put liquid. And I wanted my own business was the third thing, right? And all three came true. It took 20 years, but they all came true. And I think it's really important for your audience and the people that are following this podcast that writing down your goals and then manifesting them. But then you make your life about that, like not in like this whole thing, you need a balanced life. You can have a balanced life. You can be a professor. You can't be really a lawyer because you work by the hour. It's hard to have a balanced life. So, if you cut out alcohol, you just have so much more time.
Yeah.
Back to what that is. That there's just more time. I remember in that YPO group, we went around the circle and everyone was like, I wish I spent more time with my kids, blah, 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 blah. I said, I got to mine. I said, I've spent plenty of time with my kids. I'm with them all the time. Friday night, I'm not out drinking. I'm home with them, right? I chose to go boating instead of golfing because if I'm going to be out on something for 4 hours, I want my kids to be there, and so we can all be on a boat together versus, on a golf course. Again, this whole thing with golf is just silly. I think I know it's your industry and you're making lots of money doing it and people enjoy it, but say the truth. Like, I play golf because I like it and it's a great hobby and it's a great sport and I bond with my friends, but don't ever say it's because of business. It's just not.
I haven't made any deals on the course, not yet.
Yeah, so I don't think anyone does. Because normally you stick with your foursome, right? So you're not going to get any business leads out of your foursome, right? So, the other thing is, I have people that work for me that are sales and they're good and they're making money, but, they're not joining the right organizations to grow their business. I mean, there's a big paddle thing here on South Beach that, they go to, and you're not going to get any customers for that. Where you're going to get them is if you join, the Rotary Club in Bolivia, the Farming Rotary Club, that's where you'll get clients, that's where you should be there, So I would say your number one priority is your family. And the other thing is your career and you can intertwine that,
And we're getting close to wrapping up here. I don't want to hold you too much longer. I know you got a busy day, but you talk about like having these goals. And I actually just had this conversation with my team today when we did our cultural building in the morning about how like a lot of people have these like floating goals and they're just kind of hoping that their path in their life is going to intersect with these goals. And some people do hit the lottery, but not many. But if you look at like what their daily routine looks like, it's not really congruent with that goal. How do you like reverse engineer that goal into like a daily actionable plan? How do you make sure that it happens, like that you reach that goal?
I know as a salesperson that you can't necessarily grind for, 8 hours of cold calling. But if you're, it's just like language. They say, if you study for 20 minutes a day, it's better than studying 3 hours at the end of the week. As a salesperson, they should be making themselves call X number. If it's 100 a day, if it's depending on what the business is and how long the phone calls are, they have to pick up the phone and call. Okay, their goals are not going to intersect. But as a business owner, you have to make the big mistake, I think, for the first, 8 years of ExpoCredit, now that I'm in my 11th, is thinking that if I hire a salesperson, I'm going to get all this business. It's not how it works. I have to generate leads, okay? And I can't count on salespeople, especially salespeople who've been in the industry for a while. For some reason, they come in, they talk this game, and they just don't produce. I'd rather bring someone fresh and teach them how to sell, and give them good habits, not bad habits. But, in any scenario, it's really, making sure that they do X every day. My nephew, Matt, he sets up his day. He knows how he's going to do it. He's using Salesforce and the
HubSpot.
Yeah, HubSpot's his main one. Sets up who he's going to call for that day, and then he makes those calls. And he's doing phenomenal. He's doing great, and he will be successful. He will be successful because he's
executing a plan.
Yeah, exactly right. So for your team, whatever that plan is, the HubSpot, okay, you set your lead, you do your clicks, you get it, and then you make the calls.
And the great thing is we have the data to say, like, if we do this many calls, we're going to get X amount of revenue. And, you know, people will say, I want to make $1 million in the next 5 years. It's like, okay, well, this is how many calls you got to make.
Right.
It's like, well, I only made 1/10 of those. But then they expect to still make the $1 million. It's like, no, you're going to make 1/10 of what you set there.
Well, you know, as I was talking about before is that, you know, you land that big client. You don't celebrate. You go to the next one. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, for salespeople, they like to celebrate that big call, the big transaction they had, and they take the rest of the day off. You're not going to be successful. One of my closest friends today owns 28 dealerships. Mario Mergado. Okay, like us, started at the bottom. He had like this corporate job. He didn't like it. Loved cars. Became a salesman. Okay, salesman, and he worked 7 days a week. Okay. And he took half days on Wednesdays so he could take his wife to lunch because lunch was cheaper than dinner. Okay. And he saved that money. Him and his wife bought into the goal, saved their money, and paid off their mortgage in 5 years. So they had no leverage, right? Did it for 20 years. Eventually got to the point where he had enough money to buy a broken down Honda store in Little Havana. They were going to close it. Wow. And he went and treated the same way. Worked 7 days a week. And today he's overseeing an empire. And it's because of that discipline, making the phone calls, following up on those people that came in to look at cars. And I think the Honda door per square foot is like the number one in the country.
Wow.
And he's just persistent and hardworking. And, you know, but he makes his friendships are revolved around work. You know, we have an investment together, so we spend time together. And, you know, it's an honor to spend the time with that guy. He's just amazing. A real inspiration.
And I know I say, like, you know, what I want my sales team's goals to be, like, better. And really, I believe, like, there is no bad soldiers, only bad generals. So I ask for myself to, like, understand how do I motivate them to, like, you know.
Well, I think as a leader, though, is that, you know, if you have 5, you probably need to terminate 1. But communicate to them, this is my expectations, this is how many phone calls you need to make, and
right.
This is what I want to see. And if I see that activity, you're good to go, and I'll be patient with you. But if you're not doing those activities, then, you know, you got to go find something else. And it's not insulting, be respectful.
Yeah.
But lay out what your expectations are and then hold them accountable. Even the guy that lands that big contract, if it was luck,
he's going to have the same standards.
He has to have the same standards, exactly. And he should be on the phone leading the group, you know. And you've already shown that you can do it. Now you need them to do it.
So final question is, do you have any, like, good books that you'd recommend to our audience that were inspiring for you or game changers?
I think there's a lot of books. Bobby Castro's book, Upsider, is really good. It's written for anyone. You don't have to be have a college degree to read it. So I think he said it was 9th grade level. It's where he dropped out of school, and now he's soon to be a billionaire. His book is great. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a great one because it's buying assets, not liabilities.
That's what started me on this whole journey.
You know, a lot of these books that were written, I sort of just naturally lived that way by saving my money because I knew I wanted to own my own company. Millionaire Next Door, again, about saving money, is a really good book. Richest Man in Babylon is a good short story that, you know, The Alchemist is a Brazilian, just talking about overcoming hardships. At the end, you get rewarded, you know, keep pushing through. You know, there's a lot of good books, you know, and also I think that for conversation, you should be reading the Wall Street Journal or, and nothing else. Read the headlines if you're not a big reader, just to see what's going on. So when you're in that next business sales meeting, that you can talk about not just your product, but something interesting that's going on.
Right.
I'm older, so I've gotten more involved in politics. You know, I'm never going to be a politician, but I enjoy it. But part of it is being able to tell stories, you know, in understanding what's going on in your country, in your state, in your, in your city. Opportunities come by because you're just engaged. You have that energy. You gotta get out. You gotta get talking. Here you are talking to me today. Came over to my house one Tuesday evening. Started, we hit it off. That's why we're here today, right? Because you're out. You have that energy.
Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Well, any last comments that you'll give for entrepreneurs or anything you want to plug before we jump off?
I think that, never give up, but don't be silly about it. Save your money, set this self up. Don't worry about working for someone. If you're learn on someone else's dime, and, those opportunities will come. And if nothing else, do what I said, become a sales company. And because Apple needs sales. And, love your family, because I think that at the end of the day, if you don't have family, it doesn't matter how much money you make. I'm not saying not make money, because having money, you can do more for your family, right?
Right.
But you personally make the sacrifices.
Well, thanks, George. It's been a pleasure having you. This wraps up episode 9 of Shakin' Hands. I'm your host, Jack Moran. You can find me on Instagram at Blue Collar Kid. That is Blue Collar KEHD. If you have any recommendations for guests or any questions you want to ask to our guests, please feel free to reach out. And other than that, stay tuned for more interesting conversations. Thanks.